The wood used for this vehicle was mahogany, salvaged from an old-school cupboard. The first operation was to cut it into usable widths and lengths. Not having a table saw, it was cut to width with a circular saw and to length by hand. A painted surface has a detrimental effect on the blades of a thicknesser. So a thin slice was cut off on the bandsaw to remove the paint. After which, the wood was cut into suitable thicknesses to be finished off on the thicknesser itself. The thicknesses required are 6 and 14 millimeters. Slight variations such as 1/4 and 9/16 of an inch will have little effect on the overall proportions, but will require adjustments to the width of crossbody parts such as the roof. All of the templates were glued to the wood using blue plumber's tape as an intermediary. When peeled off after cutting, the tape comes away from the wood without leaving a tacky residue. The center section or bed of the truck was made by gluing together two pieces of wood, each of which was 14 millimeters thick. Two pieces, 6 millimeters thick, which would become the outside panels, were fixed together using double-sided tape. When cut on the bandsaw, this would produce two identical parts. The same arrangement was used for the inside panel and the mudguards. In the case of the mudguards, care needs to be taken as to where the tape is placed. Separating the parts after they come off the bandsaw creates the possibility of the mudguards being broken. The first operation was drilling the axle holes 7 millimeters diameter. A hole also needed to be drilled in the outer panel to accommodate the scroll saw blade. All the body profiles were cut out on the bandsaw. A walnut offcut, which would represent the radiator, was glued to the front of the engine block. Once the two parts were secure, the engine and radiator were shaped on the sander. The two inner side panels had to be split apart and the tape's residue removed. Once that was done, the two panels were glued in place. Doing them one at a time made alignment considerably easier. The mudguards needed to be separated with care to prevent them being broken. This should not have been done until the top surfaces were sanded. To reiterate, the sanding of the top surfaces of the mudguards should have been done before the two parts were separated. The outer panels were separated. It's important to note that there was no double-sided tape holding the uprights that form the front of the cab. Had there been any tape in this position, the uprights would have been very vulnerable to breaking. At this point, the mudguards were glued to the outer panels. Once secure, the wheel arches for the combined pieces could be sanded with a drum sander at the same time. A rectangle which became the bulkhead was cut out with a tenon saw, and then the edges chamfered using a file. A disc sander could provide an alternative method of chamfering the three edges. The bulkhead was glued in place using the outer side panels as guides to ensure the positioning was correct. To locate the inner bulkhead correctly, the two outer panels were clamped in place to act as guides. Once the bulkhead was glued in place, the outer panels were removed to allow the fitting of the seats and the steering wheel. Whilst the glue on the inner bulkhead was setting, the seats and steering wheel were produced. Only 2 seats were cut, although a vehicle of this type would have had a single seat for the driver and a bench seat for the passengers, or possibly a single 3-seater bench. The wood for the steering wheel was clamped in place and initially drilled 3 mm diameter to suit the steering column. Then it was cut out using a plug cutter. The steering column was a piece of a meat skewer. The seats were glued in place, and a hole, not shown, was drilled for the steering wheel column to be fitted. One at a time, the outside panels were glued in position. Considerable care was needed to ensure all the parts were correctly aligned. The cab's rear panel was cut and adjusted, to compensate between the drawing size and the actual manufactured size. Because of the tight fit, the panel was glued in with super glue. The height of the cab had to be leveled to fit the roof. Once this had been completed, the roof edges were rounded over. Unfortunately, this operation was not filmed. The sides and ends of the cargo box were cut as pairs to ensure they were identical lengths. Gluing the ends to the first side involved the use of a 1-2-3 block to ensure the corners were square. The second side was added without any need for adjustment. Once the base was glued in place, the sides and ends were sanded to remove any mismatch, and the cargo box was coated with mineral oil. The mismatch at the end of the truck was removed with the sander. Off-camera, the cab's interior had been treated with mineral oil before the roof was glued into place. Notice how the mineral oil had seeped out of the cab through the mahogany. The rear and one side of the cab, plus the truck's bed, were sanded to remove any mismatch. A 3 mm diameter hole was drilled each side of the engine block for the headlamp stalk, which would also be a piece of a meat skewer. The headlamps were made from a 8 mm diameter dowel. The first operation was to drill a 3 mm diameter hole to accept the mounting stalk. Then onto the lathe to turn the end, and finally to part off using a tenon saw. the wheels were cut out with a hole saw. By cutting most of the way through from one side, then finishing from the other, should make it easier to extract the blank from the cutter. Using a 6 mm diameter bolt as a mandrel, the wheels were mounted on the lathe. This would result in each axle having a pair of wheels of the same diameter. The circumference was sanded to remove any marks produced by the hole cutter. The exposed edge of each wheel was rounded over. Relieving the face creates the wheel's hub and the tire. The tire's treads were cut with a skew chisel. With the treads cut, the circumference was given a finished sanding, and then the wheels were reversed on the mandrel in order to relieve the face of the second wheel. The completed wheels were treated with mineral oil. The cargo box was glued in place, with care being taken to assure its correct position. A weight was used to hold the box in place until the glue dried. Note the headlamps had already been added, although this could have been left until the final operation. Once the box was secure, the entire vehicle was given a coat of mineral oil. All that remained was to cut 2 pieces of 6 mm diameter dowel for the axles, and to glue the wheels in place. As a final note, putting a 6 mm diameter washer between the wheel and the truck's body will reduce the friction and make the truck go faster. Thanks for watching. To see more wooden toys being made, go to Found in Wood. Please like, share and subscribe, it really would be appreciated.